Look, your story, Bryan, is a story that every Christian goes through spiritually. You went through it physically, where we are guilty. We need salvation. We need a savior. We can't save ourselves. It doesn't matter how we got ourselves into this situation, but here we are. But the story, I'm gonna let you tell the story, but I'm just gonna let everybody know it ends with Bryan hanging out a window by his fingertips. Tell that story, bro.
So we'll back up to before I got arrested. So I got arrested for beating the guy nearly to death. I go to county jail. They charge me with attempted murder, aggravated robbery, and extortion. I bond out again, and the plan was to go on the run. And so me and my friend were going to go to California, and we were going to, go down into Mexico. That was the plan. Why not Canada? For whatever reason, Mexico is more attractive to criminals. Well, I don't know what the deal is there.
Well, that was where your motorcycles were.
That's right. That is correct. I had wheels, and I had to go get them. So. But that ended up not working out. And while I was still hanging around Colorado Springs, I missed my court date. And so now all the fugitive task force, crime reduction unit, bounty hunters were all after me, and thus the dog, the bounty hunter scenario.
Right.
And so they surround a couple places that I was at, and I got away. I'd get away. And so, or, I ended up hiding, and they would get into the house and they wouldn't find me. I mean, just crazy. That happened on 2 separate occasions. And so I ended up becoming one of the most wanted criminals in Colorado Springs, if not the most wanted criminal in Colorado Springs. And they finally get me at this apartment complex. I'm in a 3rd-story apartment. I call it my safe house, but that's where I was before we were going to go to California down in Mexico. I'm on the 3rd story, and this is June 19th, 2007. I wake up at like 3 in the afternoon. I'm not a healthy, responsible individual. I woke up at 3 in the afternoon. And I smoked some weed, and I was watching the Chappelle Show cooking bratwurst. I know it's weird, the details, but that's what I was doing.
Yeah, those details stick with you.
They do.
Yeah.
When in any trauma situation, it just pops in your memory every time.
And I love the picture painting. I love that.
Yes.
So.
Yep. Bratwurst, Chappelle, weed, Bryan, 3 in the afternoon.
That's right. There it is. And so I go and look out the window, and I see the front end of a cop car. And so I'm like, okay, the gig is up. They're here. And I started hearing boom, 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 Colorado Springs police, open up. And they kick in the door, but it wasn't my door. So they were like 4 or 5 apartments down the hallway kicking in doors because they didn't know which one I was in. And so I had a recliner in there, and the recliner was wider than the window. And the guy that I was supposed to go to California and Mexico with, a guy named Spider, he showed me how to tie a nylon rope to the bottom of this recliner. And every 18 inches, there was a double knot so I could climb down. And so if this situation happened, see, I was prepared. I was like a 6-time felon Boy Scout, essentially.
Yeah.
I didn't have a Swiss Army knife. I had a meth pipe. That was about it.
Yeah.
But, so I kicked the screen out of the window. I wrapped the rope around my hand and jumped from the 3rd story. And then I'm hanging from the 3rd story. And what I didn't know is there was a surveillance van in that parking lot behind the apartment building, and 50 or 60 cops come swarming from around each side of the building with guns drawn. And that was it. And they said, get on the ground, except they were saying some choice words that I wouldn't say on this here Christian media podcast.
Thank you.
To me about getting, getting on the ground. And so I ended up, grabbing the rope, unwrapping my hand, and dropping 3 stories and hit the ground. And they put their knee in my back and put the cuffs on me. And that was it. That was June 19th, 2007.
Well, let's get ahead a little bit. You are convicted. You now go to prison. You're facing 16 years, but you did not serve even close to that. And there's some miracles that happen, including going back to your 8th grade girlfriend. So let's pick it up from there.
Yeah. So I end up going to Walsenburg, Colorado is the first prison I go to. And the first person I meet there, a guy comes up to me. He's a big guy, even bigger than me. And he's got a Semper Fi tattoo on his arm. And he says, hi, my name's Charles Frederick, and I'm a Christian. This is a faith pod. I said, what is a faith pod? And he says, well, we do discipleship and worship in the morning and stuff. And I'm like, I don't even know what these words mean. And I said, look, man, we can be friends. You obviously look like you know your way around the joint, but, you can leave the Jesus stuff at the door. And so he just shakes his head and he says, okay. And he just becomes my friend. And over, the course of the next year, he begins just planting gospel seeds in the conversations as opportunity allowed. He didn't browbeat me, and he provided for me. You get in there and you've got your, a couple pairs of underwear, your green suit, a cup and a spoon. That's it. And so he gave me soups. He gave me, sweats. He gave me coffee, things like that. And then just became my friend. And again, dropped gospel seeds as time would allow. he ended up getting shipped to another prison. I bounced around and ended up getting going to a couple other prisons. And then we both ended up at Sterling Correctional Facility together. And I walk out on the yard and boom, there's Charles, picked up right where we left off with him planting gospel seeds. He gets me into some faith-based programs, one of which was that is ultimately where I got saved, was the Truth Project with Dr. Del Tackett, which is just absolutely incredible. If you haven't
awesome.
been through,
we are 9 weeks, we are 9 episodes through in my church here in Iowa with a small group, just kind of going through it. And there's somebody in the Truth Project that you actually partied with that you know pretty well.
Yeah, no, I used to do drugs with Flash, and so it's a whole deal. If you've seen the Truth Project and you've been through it, Flash is a guy that they interview. And what's interesting is they interview people all over the world in the Truth Project. And then all of a sudden, boom, they come to this guy that used to buy drugs from me. And I'm like, whoa. Yeah. So that actually kind of played a part in it. So I'm in the Truth Project. I see Flash in there. And one of the guys, like, he tells his story at the end. I'm like, well, I'm going to stick around for that. Well, I'm in there and I'm arguing with these guys, though, because, you know, there's some mega truth claims that are coming from Dr. Del Tackett and these guys at my table. And I'm like, look, man, you know, you guys are stupid if you believe this, right? And I said that, and I almost got in a fight with these guys. And just because they were Christians didn't mean they weren't convicts. You know what I mean? And I'm going to tell them they're stupid if they believe this. And the deal was, I believed in God, but I didn't know how to. I didn't understand Jesus. I could believe that this Jewish guy got nailed to a piece of wood 2,000 years ago, right? I could believe that and created a cult following, but I couldn't believe that Jesus was the Son of God, that he was born of a virgin, that he lived a perfect life and didn't do anything wrong, that he died and his death did something for me, and he rose from the dead. Those are my issues with the Christian faith, and turns out they're pretty paramount in it.
Well, at least you picked the big ones.
So,
almost like you were calling those other convicts Bible idiots, right?
So I'm going back to my cell after that night, or, you know, and we're in the education building. We're walking over back to the units where we live. And Charles just says, look, Bryan, why don't you give him a chance? And for whatever reason, again, I understand God's sovereignty, so I know the reason. That was it. I've been told that a million times. Why don't you give him a chance? Why don't you give him a chance? And I went back to my cell and prayed that night. Again, I believed in God. I prayed. I was agnostic. I just didn't understand the Jesus piece. Yeah. So I prayed to God and said, look, God, if I need to believe that Jesus was your son, that he was born of a virgin, that, you know, that I went through all those things. I said, you're going to have to show me, because I'm having serious issues with it. And so I ended up going to sleep that night and having this horrible nightmare. I've fallen off a cliff in my sleep, and I wake up in cold sweats like I'm falling, and I look at my clock, and in my cell, the clock says 3:16. It was the only thing I could see in my cell was the clock. And the only Bible verse I've ever known my entire life is John 3:16, which was the answer to my question. And so I ended up, that was Sunday morning at 3:16 in the morning. I ended up getting up, going to Christian Services, is what they call church there. You got to be politically correct. So we went to Christian Services. Chaplain Davis preached. I don't remember a word that he preached, but at the end he did an invitation. And the guy I was with, I looked over, I said, Ramon, what is an invitation? And, he didn't say, well, that's where you invite Jesus into your heart, brother. He said, look, man, if you've got something hindering your relationship with God, you can go down there and pray with that man about it. And he just stepped out of the way because he knew God was moving. And so I go down to the front. Chaplain Davis grabs my hand, puts his other hand on my shoulder and says, look, Mr. Dawson, how can I pray for you? I said, look, chap, I'm not here to make any decisions. I would just ask you to pray that God would soften my heart so the truth can come in, because I can tell he's working on me and I'm fighting with everything I have. And so he prays for me, and we finish praying, and I look up in his face, and he's just got tears pouring down his face. And, here he is, this, he's very much a man's man, prison chaplain, kind of guy, and he's in front of 130 inmates just weeping. And I knew that God had moved and done something. I count that the moment, the day that I got saved.
This has been a sample of No Apology with Emilee and Chris. For full episodes and other content, go to our website, freshroadmedia.com. And thank you for sharing and subscribing.